Okay, so here we are in 2021, and perhaps now more than ever it can be said that we are living in times of rapid change. The world today is a much different place than it was just a year ago at the start of the global pandemic. Everything from politics to the economy, from business to the way we work, all the way down to the simplest of human interactions, like the way we greet a friend or a neighbor, have all been impacted. And as if the health crisis weren't already enough, if you throw in issues like climate change, wealth inequality, economic instability, social unrest, political division. I could go on, but the point is, there seems to be no end to the number of problems in the world today that need to be solved. And so I can think of no better theme for today's talk than that of revision and refocus. Right now, we have a unique opportunity to re-envision our values and to refocus our priorities together as a global community. And rather than let this crisis go to waste, we need to come together to improve the state of humanity and ensure that our new normal is better than the old one. Now, the good news is that there are other forces working in our favor. Technology continues to advance at an exponential rate, promising new levels of prosperity and abundance for the majority of the world. We are actually living in the beginning of what Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum has called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. That's a technological revolution that promises to fundamentally change the way that we live, work, and relate to one another. And unlike past revolutions, where those including steam power, electrical power, and computer technology, this one is unraveling at an exponential rate. And it seems like everywhere you look in the world today, technology is taking over. And we've got everything from artificial intelligence, robotics and automation, 5G and Internet of Things, virtual and augmented reality, facial recognition, self-driving cars, drones, 3D printing, blockchain, nanotech, biotech, fintech, food tech, every kind of tech, quantum computing, Mars exploration. You get the point. And so as yesterday's science fiction becomes today's reality, it's getting harder and harder to predict exactly where all of this rapid growth is really leading us. And a lot of people are starting to worry about getting left behind, and not without good reason. It's no wonder then that many people have turned to tech billionaires like Bill Gates and Elon Musk and others like them for a sense of direction. After all, they have proven themselves to be pretty good, better than most at least, at solving complex problems with an eye towards the future. But simply relying on a small handful of technocratic leaders to solve all of the world's problems for us probably isn't the most sustainable or even realistic course of action. If you ask me, I think we're much better off trying to learn from their example and then apply that knowledge towards solving more of our own problems. So perhaps more valuable than the businesses they've built, the technologies they've developed, or even the wealth that they've accumulated is the systems and processes that they've developed to consistently innovate along the way. It kind of reminds me of the old saying, and you've probably heard it. If you give a man a fish, you'll feed him for a day, but if you teach a man to fish, you'll feed him for a lifetime. And I like to think of that as a metaphor for the type of problem solving we're talking about today. Now, if you think about it, if you solve someone's problem for them, they'll be in good shape for maybe a day or two, but only until the next problem comes along. And if you teach them how to solve their own problem, and by extension, if enough people learn how to be problem solvers in their own right, well, at some point we start to reach a critical mass, and I think the problems that we're facing in the world might start to seem a little less daunting. At least that's what I hope. Now, I've spent the last 10 years immersed in this world of tech innovation as both a product designer and an entrepreneur. And coming from a graphic design background, the working in tech has really changed the way that I think about what design really is. And like most people, I used to think of design as, all about making things look beautiful. And that's true to an extent on a superficial level, but great design really goes much deeper than appearances. And what I've come to believe now is that great design is what happens when we use our creative thinking to solve real-world problems. So over the last decade, I've witnessed as the role of role of design in tech has evolved from simply slapping a coat of paint on a finished product to really influencing every stage of product development and becoming a core business value. One of the most important ideological innovations that I've witnessed in this same time period has been design thinking, a framework that draws from the scientific method to form an iterative and human-centered design approach. Now, many talks like this one have been dedicated already to explaining design thinking in great detail, so I won't go into it all here, but I'll just give you the gist of it. It's basically breaking the design process down into 5 steps. In stage 1, you empathize with the people you are developing a product or service for, ideally by speaking to them and trying to understand their needs. In stage 2, you clearly define what those needs are and the problem you're trying to solve. Then in stage 3, you brainstorm a bunch of different potential solutions and try to narrow it down to the most viable ones. In stage 4, you create a prototype that you can use to test those assumptions. And then in stage 5, you show that prototype to real people and gain valuable feedback. Now, this scientific and data-driven approach to design really caught on when it first came out, especially in the tech community. And a lot of companies and consultants got a lot of great results out of it. But different teams started to interpret it in different ways, and eventually there was many different interpretations of design thinking as there were tech firms. Now, as a consultant working with a lot of different startups, I found myself having to constantly adapt my approach to fit in with all of these different versions of design thinking. And so I quickly realized the need for a more unified process that would deliver more consistent results. And so luckily for me, I wasn't the only one thinking that at the time. Now, thousands of miles away, in a little town called Berlin, Germany, there was a small boutique design firm called AJ & Smart. And they were working on a design thinking process that turned out to be everything I was looking for. They themselves were inspired by a book called Sprint, How to Solve Big Problems and Test New Ideas in Just 5 Days, written by Jake Knapp. Now, he was also a product designer at Google Ventures, and he was frustrated the same way I was by all of the different ways that design thinking was being applied at different startups and the lack of a practical system for its application. So he created a step-by-step system that he called the design sprint, and he started teaching that to different startups at Google Ventures. And after stress testing it with hundreds of startups, he wrote the book. And then AJ & Smart took that book and they adapted it to use in their agency. And they started running successful design sprints with their enterprise tech clients like Airbnb, Uber, Netflix, and even with more traditional companies like GE, Bose, Lufthansa, and others. And so flash forward to today, and now we have hundreds of companies actually using design sprints every day to create products that you and I know and love, faster and better than ever before. But even still, it's a relatively small number of early adopters. So if design sprints work as well as I say they do, then why aren't more people using them? Well, it's not for lack of effort. Now, to their credit, AJ & Smart and Jake Knapp have been prolific in creating educational content for platforms like YouTube. They've also created the definitive online course on the subject, of which I am a graduate. But still, outside of the tech and design community, it's still relatively unknown. So even those who have learned and seen how great it actually works, a lot of them see it as a competitive advantage, and so they're not too keen on spreading the word. And even I myself have to admit I've been guilty of quietly using design sprints to my own advantage in my consulting practice. But the truth is, I've seen firsthand just how transformational this process can be for companies of all different sizes and types. And given the current situation that most small businesses in the world are facing right now in particular, there's never been a better time to make sure that this information is open source and available to all. Now, the design sprint is a week-long process, so obviously I won't have time to teach it all to you today, but I'm going to try my best to show you the value of it, and hopefully you can do your own research and figure out if it's something you can apply in your own work. So what is it? Now, Design Sprint is a 4 to 5 day process for solving big challenges, creating new products or services, or improving existing ones. And if done right, it can really remove a lot of the risk of trying new ideas. It's extremely time efficient, and it compresses potentially months of work down into just a few days. It's based on the design thinking framework, but its effectiveness stems from a few additional principles, which I'll briefly describe. The first one is together alone, and I know what you're thinking, but no, this has nothing to do with social distancing. In fact, it's when a group of people all work together doing deep, focused work on the same thing at the same time, but separately and without talking to one another. The second is tangible discussion. Now that means that all discussions within the sprint have to happen around something tangible, like a well-defined goal or a sketch of a proposed solution, rather than around intangible ideas, which lead to all sorts of unstructured, unproductive conversations that can waste a lot of time. The third is getting started is better than being right, and being done is better than being perfect. So we hold a bias towards action in the sprint, and all of the activities are time-boxed to keep the momentum moving forward. We value progress over perfection. And the fourth is don't rely on creativity. And this one's probably the most counterintuitive, but really the value of this process is derived from the diversity of the participants rather than from individual creativity. So there's no pressure on anyone to be uniquely creative. Now, guided by these principles, cross-functional teams of 7 to 8 people are led by a facilitator through a series of activities, each one building upon the last. And along the way, they will define a problem to be solved, produce a mass of potential solutions. They will vote anonymously to find the best of those, and then they'll create a realistic prototype that they'll go out and test in the real world with real human beings, and then gather valuable feedback that they can use to create clear next steps. So in just 1 week, the team will have built alignment around a new idea. They'll have explored a wide range of possibilities, and they'll have gathered valuable real-world data that they can use to move forward confidently. Now, it's so simple that everybody can participate, anyone really, and even those who believe they don't have a creative bone in their body. And the best part is, not only is it a fun and collaborative way to work, but it even works great remotely. Now, many teams over the past year have used design sprints to stay connected even while working from home. Design sprints have been used successfully to solve everything from building a new feature in your favorite social media app, even to providing clean water in Africa, and also to solving problems related to this pandemic. The great thing is that there's really no limit to the number of ways you can apply the design sprint. Many teams are adapting these flexible methods to create custom workshops that they use to address specific areas of business like strategy, marketing, operations, process design, and even more complicated things like social welfare. These new custom workshops expand the possibilities even further and are dynamically addressing new use cases. So now you've seen a glimpse of this creative process that's been emerging in the tech industry to empower everyday non-creatives to participate in innovation at some of the world's biggest companies. But I'd like to suggest that these very same principles can be applied outside of the world of consumer tech to help diverse groups of people solve some of the world's most pressing social, political, and economic issues. But before that, I'd like to just add, as children, we are encouraged to explore our creativity. But as we get older and in school, More and more, we're taught to seek the one right answer to every problem. And slowly over time, we're conditioned to have a fear of being wrong, which we associate with failure. And we carry this mental framework with us into the workplace. And as employees, we quickly learn that making mistakes and taking risks can lead to getting you fired. So we've adapted to this environment by playing it safe, avoiding risk, and conforming to the status quo. And the sad thing about it is that the majority of the best ideas in an organization never get voiced outside of the break room. And so what I've seen time and time again is actually that some of the best ideas don't come from the CEO or the highest paid or loudest voice in the room, but actually from those who, under normal circumstances, would never speak up in a typical business meeting, either for social or office dynamics. The true beauty of the design sprint is that it levels the playing field by placing emphasis on the clarity and value of freestanding ideas rather than superficial hierarchies. And in an increasingly diverse world, we really need this type of decision-making to become the norm so that we can create a fairer, more equitable, more inclusive future. Stakeholder capitalism has shown us what happens when the benefits derived from decisions disproportionately serve those with the power to make them. And design sprints, on the other hand, prove to us that the best decisions involve participation from a diversity of stakeholders, especially those most adversely affected by the outcomes of them. So I truly believe that the design sprint and the workshop model provide for us a roadmap towards the democratization of innovation for everyone. The fourth industrial revolution is going to be a time where technology makes possible the solving of problems that our parents never dreamed of. As imaginative constraints replace technical ones, the demand for creative problem solving is on the rise. And design and creativity are set to transform the global economy in the 21st century the same way that science and technology transformed it in the last. But despite the promise and potential technology offers towards creating a better future, we're standing at a crossroads. And if too many of us choose to stand idly by and allow the future to be defined for us by others, we'll have no say in what it becomes. Now, I believe there are two types of people. There are those who set out to create things in the world, and there are those who simply abide to live in a world that others have created for them. So I want to close today by saying that whether you believe it or not, we are all actually co-creators on this earth. And the world right now needs creators like you and I to help more than ever. The events of the past year have created an endless demand for innovation across the globe. And I believe that if we work together and with the right framework, we just might have a chance of keeping up with it. Thank you.